After years of research, Steve and his team managed to create an identical twin of the engine and the sphere. The engine will allow them interstellar flights, and the sphere will grant them the power to create life on a new planet to make it suitable for humanity. They plan to land on a planet they call Tess and start terraforming it to give way for humanity's chance of survival. The team consists of Steve himself, Peter, an expert in extraterrestrial warp engine, Leona, the terraforming program builder, David, a program scientist, and 3 military-trained pilots, Ryan, Frank, and Richard. The day of the mission launch has arrived. Steve's wife, Amy, tries to stop him, but it's too late. As soon as the cruiser arrives at a safe distance from Earth's orbit, Steve orders to commence warp drive, which will allow them to instantly travel to Tess. However, during the drive, the cruiser suffers from a critical error that renders all of them unconscious. They soon wake up to find themselves in front of a planet with its own sun. When they check the star maps, they are nowhere near Tess, but in a different location entirely. Steve lashes out at Peter for inputting the wrong coordinates and relieves him of his duty. Since they have no idea where they are, they cannot return to Earth. Suddenly, another alert of an incoming unidentified object resounds. The crew is appalled to see Peter's frozen body collide with the viewing panel of the cruiser. David assumes Peter took his own life due to guilt. Leona disagrees, but they have no time to mourn his passing. Their priority is the mission. They conduct a test on the nearby planet, and Steve decides to continue their mission on it. The others disapprove, especially Ryan, considering the risks. But as the mission commander, Steve insists they land and start the terraforming process. Richard stays to monitor them, while the rest make their way to the surface via a lander. However, they encounter a gigantic storm which causes the lander to crash as they deliberately lose the fuel they need for return. Steve, on the other hand, has no plans of returning. He emphasizes that their main task is to deploy the sphere in a nearby cave to begin their mission. As they transport the sphere, a strange sticky goo appears under the panel where the sphere was kept inside the lander. In orbit, Richard notices the same sticky goo in the engine repair airlock and later finds Peter's camera. He immediately alerts Ryan of his findings just as the crew activates the sphere. Ryan orders them to return to the lander and declares martial law. He explains that he has found out new information about the sphere. He asks Richard to pull up the footage from Peter's camera. It shows how Peter tries to prove he did not make a mistake during the warp drive. As he continues his inspection, something attacks him, causing interference on the video feed until it cuts off. Upon checking all the recordings on their cameras, they discover that the creature who attacked Peter came from the sphere itself and messed with the engine just before the warp drive, causing them to arrive where they are now. They refer to it as the Trojan, sneaking in just as the soldiers did with the historical Trojan horse. Richard also explains that it went down to the surface with the sphere as he tracks its location. Just then, David informs Steve that the sphere is not working according to plan, and Steve insists they go back to adjust its settings. Ryan stops him, saying he no longer has the authority to give commands. The others agree with Steve, but Ryan reveals that Steve has not been completely honest with the team. Ryan pulls up footage from when Steve encounters an unknown being in the cave back on Earth, but refuses to tell anyone. He blames Steve for risking the lives of the crew and for Peter's death. Feeling the guilt, Steve storms off. Despite Ryan's direct orders to stay in the lander, Steve decides to go back to the cave and convinces David to come with him on behalf of David's daughter, Rita, who died from the plant virus. David agrees. They later arrive at the cave, where they discover that the sphere is creating an alien life form. Steve proceeds to adjust its settings, but David detects the Trojan closing in on them fast. He insists on leaving, but Steve refuses, so he fires a warning shot at the sphere, causing a shard to fall off. It fails to discourage Steve, who then aims a gun at him. As they argue, the Trojan arrives and they immediately run back to the lander, not before Steve picks up the shard from the sphere. Thankfully, they manage to get back alive. Steve warns David he will not hesitate to kill him if he compromises the mission again. Ryan arrives, demanding to know what Steve has done, and punches him in the face for disobeying orders that might put the entire crew's lives in danger. The alarm goes off. The Trojan has breached the lander. Leona wakes up to the alarm and finds the hallways filled with the strange goo from the Trojan. As she walks down the hallways, keeping high alert for a possible attack, Frank pulls her to the corner and tells her to keep quiet. They enter the laboratory, where they soon encounter the Trojan. Frank sacrifices himself to give Leona a chance to escape. She arrives at the control room and informs everyone that the Trojan is inside the lab. They learn that the Trojan has entered through the thinnest part of the lander's hull, prompting them to believe that it's a highly intelligent being. Steve figures out a way to lure the Trojan out of the lander and kill it with their rocket boosters. He will act as the main decoy, and Leona will have to manually open the airlock from the inside before hiding in the technical bay. This will force the Trojan to chase Steve outside. When the Trojan finally finds Steve, they suddenly encounter a malfunction in their rocket boosters. Leona has no choice but to help Steve and distract the Trojan. However, the rocket boosters finally power up, and she gets caught in the trajectory, incinerating her. The Trojan continues to chase after Steve, who climbs into the hatch where David awaits. They manage to close the airlock in time, breaking off a small, tentacle-like part from the Trojan. The scene then shifts to Steve's memory to when Amy tries to convince him again to stay on Earth, revealing that she is pregnant with their child. She also explains that she has found a breakthrough for the vaccine and asks Steve to check it, but Steve cannot abandon his mission. Despite her pleas, Amy fails to convince Steve to stay. Back on the lander, Steve discovers that the Trojan is a bio-robot created by the Sphere, while David lies on the medical bed, tending to the injuries he incurred from the Trojan. According to his findings, the key to the vaccine lies in David's blood. The bacteria that infected David has a powerful defense mechanism, but they need to figure out a way to send this information back to Earth. When Steve continues to examine the bio-robot, the same being from the cave he encountered on Earth appears. Ryan arrives, and Steve explains that they need to find a way to destroy the Trojan. Ryan blames him for the death of the others and tells him how he doesn't care about anyone around him, to which David agrees. Steve remembers one of his conversations with Amy when she also agrees to what Ryan has said. He promises to come back, but Amy refuses to listen anymore. She then removes the bracelet he made for her from the Sphere's fragment and throws it before walking away. Just then, Steve realizes that they did not travel to a different location, but back in time. He contacts Richard and tells him to calculate the position of the planets 4 billion years later, revealing that they are in fact in the solar system. They are on Earth before life even began on it. He explains that the fragment he retrieved from when David fired at the Sphere and the bracelet he made for Amy is the exact same fragment. He deduces that the Sphere in the cave is the same Sphere in Earth's current time. This proves that no matter what they do, they cannot save the current Earth. The only option they have is to let Amy know about the information needed to create the vaccine. Steve engraves a code to the fragment to connect the two spheres and entrusts the rest to Amy, whom he believes will find it. Richard alerts Steve that Ryan plans on blowing up the Sphere. He opens the airlock and allows Steve to convince Ryan to stop. Suggests luring the Trojan into the lander instead before blowing it up. Suddenly, someone fires at them, instantly killing Ryan. It was David, who believes that if he kills everyone and helps the Trojan, humanity will not exist and his daughter won't have to die. Steve manages to get away from David and lures the Trojan into the lander. He tries fighting off David while also dealing with the Trojan. David catches Steve off guard and attempts to kill him, but the Trojan arrives and stabs David, allowing Steve the chance to go out of the lander before it blows up, taking the Trojan with it. Despite killing the Trojan, Steve's oxygen tank is compromised and he only has less than an hour. He tells Richard not to get him for his safety. Steve then goes to the cave to try contacting Amy. Meanwhile, it starts raining on Earth, and Amy notices the glowing code etched on the bracelet. She immediately goes to the cave and runs the sequence on the Sphere. The surroundings start to change, allowing her to get in contact with Steve face to face. Steve gives her all the information needed for the vaccine and apologizes for being unable to keep his promise that he will return. They share a kiss before Steve eventually breathes his last. In the current time, Amy has managed to create the vaccine, and Earth thrives again. She also gave birth to their child, who will now live on a safe planet thanks to the bravery of the astronauts who sacrificed their lives to save humanity. Thanks for watching. Make sure to subscribe to our channel and click here for another movie recap video.